Tiny Habits: The Small Changes That Change Everything by Fogg, 2019. Part 1. The Model. You must understand that behavior change does not require willpower or motivation alone, but a systematic approach based on how behavior actually works. Fogg introduces the Fogg behavior model, which states that for a behavior to occur, three elements must converge at the same moment: motivation, ability, and a prompt. When a behavior does not occur, at least one of those three elements is missing. Motivation is your desire to do the behavior. Ability is your capacity to do it, and the prompt is your cue to do it now. This model reveals that you can change your behavior by adjusting any of these three elements, and the most reliable place to start is by making the behavior easier to do. The common assumption that you need more motivation is often wrong. What you really need is to make the behavior so tiny that it requires almost no motivation at all. You must understand the role of motivation in behavior change and why relying on it is a recipe for failure. Motivation is unreliable because it fluctuates naturally, peaking in moments of inspiration and crashing when you are tired or stressed. When you try to change behavior by relying on motivation, you set yourself up for disappointment because your motivation will inevitably wane. The problem with motivation is that it is complex, often tied to competing desires, and difficult to sustain over time. Fogg explains that motivation is like a wave. It rises and falls, and you cannot build a lasting change on something so unstable. Instead of waiting for motivation to strike, you should design your behavior so that it requires minimal motivation by making it tiny and easy. You must understand that ability is the most reliable lever for behavior change because you can control it directly. When a behavior is hard to do, you need high motivation to complete it. When a behavior is easy, you can do it even when motivation is low. Fogg identifies 6 factors that affect ability: time, money, physical effort, mental effort, social deviance, and non-routine. By reducing any of these barriers, you make the behavior easier and therefore more likely to happen. The simplest way to increase ability is to make the behavior tiny, so small that it takes less than 30 seconds and requires almost no effort. A tiny behavior fits into your life seamlessly, and once you start, you often find yourself doing more because momentum carries you forward. You must understand that prompts are the invisible drivers of nearly all your behaviors, and you can design them to work for you. There are 3 types of prompts: person prompts that come from inside you, context prompts that come from your environment, and action prompts where an existing behavior reminds you to do a new behavior. Person prompts are unreliable because you forget them. Context prompts like phone notifications can be effective but often lead to distraction. The most powerful and reliable prompt is an action prompt, where you anchor your new habit to an existing routine. By designing prompts intentionally, you ensure that your new behaviors actually happen, rather than depending on memory or motivation. You must understand that emotions create habits, and the key to lasting change is to feel successful immediately after performing your new behavior. When you do a behavior and feel good, your brain releases dopamine, which wires in the habit and makes you want to repeat it. Fogg calls this the celebration step, and it is not optional fluff, but essential neurochemistry. The feeling of success, even from the tiniest accomplishment, signals to your brain that this behavior is worth remembering and repeating. You learn to design celebrations that work for you personally, whether that is a fist pump, a silent yes, or a small dance. The emotion you feel in the moment of celebration is what cements the habit, not the behavior itself. Part 2. The Method. You must learn the core Tiny Habits method, which consists of 3 steps: anchor, behavior, and celebration. The anchor is an existing routine in your life that will prompt the new behavior, following the formula: after I anchor, I will, new tiny behavior. The behavior must be tiny, taking less than 30 seconds and requiring minimal effort, such as flossing one tooth, doing 2 push-ups, or putting on your running shoes. The celebration is a positive emotion you create immediately after doing the behavior, telling yourself you did a good job and letting yourself feel successful. This three-part recipe, repeated consistently, builds habits that last because they are wired into your brain through positive emotion. Fogg emphasizes that the behavior must be tiny enough that you cannot fail, because success is what drives the habit formation process. You must learn to find your anchor by identifying existing routines that happen reliably every day. Your life is full of anchors: brushing your teeth, making coffee, sitting down at your desk, walking through the door after work, getting into bed. The key is to choose an anchor that has the right frequency and context for the new habit you want to build. You also need to think about where in the routine the anchor occurs, because the exact moment matters. After you brush your teeth could mean before you put the toothbrush away or after, and being specific ensures the prompt fires reliably. Fogg provides exercises to help you map your existing routines and select anchors that will work for your new habits. You must learn to make your new behavior really tiny, shrinking it until it is almost laughably easy. The classic mistake people make is trying to do too much too soon, which requires high motivation and leads to failure. Instead, you scale down the behavior to its absolute minimum. Instead of meditating for 20 minutes, you meditate for one breath. Instead of writing for an hour, you write one sentence. Instead of cleaning the whole garage, you open the garage door. The tiny behavior is the gateway, and once you start, you often do more, but the commitment is so small that you cannot fail. Fogg calls this the starter step, and it works because it lowers the barrier to entry while still creating momentum. You must learn to celebrate in a way that works for you, finding the emotion that makes you feel genuinely successful. Celebration is personal, and what works for one person may not work for another. Some people respond to physical celebration, like pumping a fist or snapping fingers, while others prefer internal celebration, like saying "good job" in their head. The key is to feel a positive emotion, however small, immediately after doing the behavior. Fogg shares research showing that the emotion must be genuine, you cannot fake it, and that the timing matters. Celebrate within seconds of the behavior to wire it in. You can experiment with different celebrations until you find the ones that create a genuine feeling of success and shine, which is his term for the positive emotion that cements habits. You must learn to grow your habits organically by letting them evolve naturally rather than forcing expansion. When you have successfully embedded a tiny habit, you will find yourself naturally doing more. 2 push-ups instead of 1, 5 minutes of meditation instead of 1 breath. This natural expansion happens because the habit feels good and you want to do more, not because you are forcing yourself. Fogg warns against artificially increasing the habit too quickly, which can break the momentum and require renewed motivation. Instead, you let the habit find its own level, trusting that the tiny version will grow when you are ready. You can also create recipes for habit stacks, where one anchor prompts multiple tiny behaviors, building up a sequence of positive routines over time. Part 3. The application. You must learn to apply the tiny habits method to stop unwanted behaviors by understanding that stopping a behavior requires addressing the same 3 elements. To stop a behavior, you can reduce your motivation for it, make it harder to do, or remove the prompt that triggers it. The prompt is usually the easiest to change because you can eliminate or avoid the cues that lead to unwanted habits. Fogg introduces the concept of designing for elimination, where you systematically identify the prompts for behaviors you want to stop, and then remove them from your environment. This might mean keeping unhealthy food out of sight, turning off notifications for distracting apps, or changing your route to avoid a tempting coffee shop. The key insight is that stopping a behavior is itself a behavior change. You must learn to apply the tiny habits method to help others change by understanding that you cannot motivate people into changing, but you can design for them. Whether you are a parent, a manager, a teacher, or a coach, your role is to create conditions that make new behaviors easy and rewarding for others. Fogg explains that the most effective way to help someone change is to focus on ability, making the behavior as simple as possible, and to celebrate their successes no matter how small. When people feel successful, they want to continue, and your encouragement can provide the emotional boost that wires in their new habits. You also learn to avoid common pitfalls, like criticizing failures or pushing too hard, which create negative emotions that undermine habit formation. You must learn to apply the tiny habits method to group and organizational change by scaling the principles beyond individuals. Fogg shares stories of companies and communities that have used his method to create widespread behavior change, from improving workplace safety to increasing customer engagement. The key is to design systems that make desired behaviors easy and to build in prompts and celebrations that work at scale. When you change the environment and the prompts, you change what people do without requiring them to have high motivation. Organizations that understand this can create cultures where positive habits spread naturally because the conditions support them. You must learn to apply the tiny habits method to your identity by understanding that the person you become is the sum of the habits you practice. When you consistently do tiny habits that align with who you want to be, you gradually transform your self-concept. You are not just someone who flosses, you become someone who takes care of their health. You are not just someone who writes one sentence, you become a writer. The identity shift happens automatically because your brain wires in the behaviors and the feelings of success that accompany them. Fogg emphasizes that this is not about positive thinking, but about positive doing. The actions themselves, repeated consistently, create the identity. You become what you do, and when you do tiny things well, you become someone who can change anything. To show love and appreciation, like, share, and subscribe.